Welcome to this module on liability-driven investing and managing interest rate risk. So here we are revisiting the idea that there's two major types of mandate that a bond portfolio manager has. One is managing their portfolio to meet liabilities as they come due, like a defined benefit pension scheme. Another is a total return manager that is trying to meet or beat an index. And in that regard, they'll be thinking about the risk factor exposures of the index, the primary one, of course, being interest rate risk exposure measured by duration. So the reader makes the point here that actually liability-driven investing is a form of asset liability management. So asset liability management is where you are thinking about managing both assets and liabilities at the same time. It's not just an asset portfolio, but there are some liabilities to consider. Now, if the liabilities are defined and they drive how you construct your asset portfolio, that's a form of asset liability management referred to as rather sensibly LDI. Often we assume we're talking about LDI when we mention asset liability management because it's simply the most common type of asset liability management. There are situations where you have your assets defined already that can't be changed, and we're managing our liabilities in relation to those assets. Like, for example, if we have a long-term investment in a property with long-term leases that are providing relatively fixed cash flows or cash flows that are defined in a certain way, then we can work out how we want to structure our liabilities to maybe remove interest rate risk from our overall exposure. For example, if our tenants are paying long-term fixed cash flows, then maybe we should fund those assets using long-term fixed financing, long-term fixed funding. That's not very common though. Asset-driven investing really gets a mention here, but from here on in the level 3 fixed income, if you go into portfolio management, we're pretty much always talking about LDI. So that's by far and away the most common form of ALM. So it's worthwhile here talking about the types of liabilities that an institution can have. They're split into 4 groups, these types of liabilities: type 1, type 2, type 3, and type 4. And the difference between them is really driven by whether we know the timing of these liabilities in terms of when they need to be paid, and whether we know the size of these liabilities in terms of how much will need to be paid. Okay, so type 1, nice and easy. We know the timing, we know the size of payments that need to be made. So, for example, a company that's issued fixed coupon bonds, they know exactly how much they need to pay in terms of fixed coupon and par, and they know exactly what time that needs to be paid as well. Right at the other end of the spectrum here, type 4 liabilities, we don't know the timing and we don't know the size, but we do know some payment needs to be made at some stage. So an example of a type 4 liability would be non-life insurance linked to catastrophes, things like earthquakes, hurricanes, flooding, that sort of thing. We write that insurance, we try our best to model the timing and the size of the claims as they come through as liabilities, but we can't be sure exactly how much we're going to have to be paying out and when. So moving in between here, type 2 liabilities, it's the T of 2, which reminds me it's the timing that is the issue. We don't know the timing. The timing is the issue. T for 2, T for timing. That's the issue here. We don't know the time, but we do know the size. So something like a callable bond, we don't know when the bond is going to be redeemed. It could be redeemed at maturity if it's not called. It could be redeemed prior to maturity if it's called early. And that means there's issues not with the size of cash flows, because we know what the cash flows are. It's like